This is Beth Walker with College Funding Coaches, and I will be joined this evening by Stuart Siegel, who will be our tour director on all things financial aid related. We're really happy that you were able to join us and look forward to helping you understand the process upon which you are about to embark. So without further ado, I'm going to get started. For those of you that have joined us tonight, you are likely staring down this road with an exit quickly approaching called college. And we know that that can be fraught with lots of questions and lots of overwhelming information. So we're going to demystify that tonight and put you in a position to make some really informed decisions. I wanted to start with a view of the way college is priced today and the perceptions that parents have about the cost of college. And when we look at a list of schools like the one that you see on the screen, ranking them from lowest in advertised sticker price to highest in advertised sticker price, I want to point out a few things, because as we go through our examples this evening in an effort to help you do a great job navigating this, it's important that you understand how college costs really work today. So on the screen you see a list of 6 schools all over the country. You see the schools that are in red are state universities, and the schools that are blue are private universities. And the state universities, the sticker prices that are listed reflect the price of the school if you are an in-state resident. So if you live in North Carolina, you'll pay a little bit less than $21,000 a year. If you live in Oregon, you'll pay a little more than $24,000 a year. Contrast that with the private universities. They don't care where you live. Their price is their price, and they're pretty healthy. But it's interesting to note that if you were to rank those schools based on the true cost of attendance, meaning the actual out-of-pocket cost that the families will pay, this is an actual ranking. Now, just note that we had to use a sample family that had a specific, set of assets and income and things that went into the formula, but this same family, if they sent their student to Stanford, would have actually spent less money in terms of out-of-pocket costs. North Carolina would be second, Davidson would be third. So I think it's a surprise to a lot of parents to find out that it isn't always cheaper to go into an in-state public school, that it can in fact be less expensive to attend a private university that has a very high sticker price. And a lot of that has to do with financial aid, and that's what we want to help you understand this evening. Because when you send your student to college, you are making a 6-figure investment decision, whether you intended to or not. You've got 4 years, you hope, when more than 50% of kids are taking 6 years to get a 4-year degree. Sometimes that's not the case, but you've got tuition, you've got books, you've got lots of costs. And so we have to really look at this for the investment that it is. And so the question becomes, how do we do this? How can we be smart and not pay retail for school? And I think the important thing to understand is that it's an integrated and a coordinated effort in these 4 areas that will really solve a family's college funding solution. First of all, you have to pick the right schools. Has to be a good fit for the student, has to minimize the opportunity for the 5th, the 6th, the 7th year of school, hopefully not any transfers where you lose money and credits in the process. Financial aid, which is where we're going to spend most of tonight. Tax scholarships, whether you can pick up education tax credits, whether there are ways that you can be really smart and get Uncle Sam to help underwrite part of the cost of school. And then, of course, creating the most efficient cash flow plan for the actual out-of-pocket costs that you will have. But clearly, financial aid is a big part of this. And so that's where we're going to invite Stuart Siegel, who is the director of the College Family Care Center, to really guide us through this process and help us understand, how do I make financial aid work for me and for our household? So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Stuart.
Okay, Beth, thank you. Well, financial aid is a really broad subject, and if you were to go on the internet and just type in financial aid, I think if you Google it, about 10 billion sites will show up. So there's a lot of information out there, and Beth and I have been in this in the college funding and admissions business for a very long time, and we found the good information and discarded the bad. Most information you find on the net is just not going to apply to you. So one of the things that we're happy to inform our parents about is, what do you do? What does it mean to me? All these rules and regulations, and what do these costs actually mean? So a lot of people, when they come to the financial aid forms, because it's not something they're familiar with, they've never really done it, they come up with a lot of maybe excuses, or they hear things from other parents like, I make too much money, so there's no way I'm going to get financial aid. Well, that might be the case. It might be, but most often it's not. Most financial aid directors, I don't think there's a few, most of them would definitely say, fill out the forms and see what you can get. You can make over $200,000 a year and get financial aid. So don't make the mistake of thinking that you won't get any, because you won't unless you apply. The second mistake parents often make is, they wait to the last minute to do everything, and they're rushing to gather all their tax information and their asset statements and rush to the forms and don't read the instructions, and they make flat-out mistakes, or they have their kids fill the form out, and I've seen that happen, and that is usually disastrous and is often undoable, the mistakes that are made, and mistakes cause delays, and there's only so much money to go around, and you could lose out on that as well. When students apply to less than 6 schools, they limit their options in terms of schools fighting over them. One of the great things that we recommend is have your student apply to many schools that would be a great fit for them, and see who offers the most money. And if there's a school A, for example, gave an okay package, the student loves the school, it's their dream school, they have to go there. But school B, which is a school that's similar and would work out, I think, however, they're offering a lot more money. Without having an award that's larger than the one that your child really wants to attend, without having some leverage, you're not going to get any more money. So applying to many schools, and with the advent of the Common App and the universal application, you can certainly do this relatively easily. Picking the wrong colleges, what does that mean exactly? Well, I would say that if you don't know what the outcomes are, and you don't know what the financial aid policies are of the schools, then you might find yourself picking a school that will give your child like nothing, no money at all, regardless of whether you qualify or not. So knowing exactly what the right schools are, because if they're going to go to school, as Beth said, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, now the government has statistics for 8-year graduation rates. That's how bad it's getting. And at the state level, we're seeing kids being pushed into the 6 and 7 years because of budget cuts and classes not being offered, where private schools are more consistent with those classes. And people make the mistake of assuming all aid's the same, and they'll look at a financial aid package, not really understanding what they're looking at, and say, well, we don't have to pay anything. Well, the fact is, maybe half of it was in loans, and you need to know, well, geez, what do these loans mean? How much can I afford to pay back? What can my student do? How much debt should they take on? Will they get a job? Do some schools give more free money, and do some schools give more, in loans. So you definitely want to know the difference before you head into this. The next mistake would be, if there is one, Beth, can you move the slide one more?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Sorry about that.
Okay, so you want to see the schools are a business. They're not charities, and they want to give money to people who don't need it. This is kind of like the bank. You go to get a loan, and if you have a large income and you have lots of assets, they're more than happy to give you as much, loan you as much as possible. Schools want full pay clients. They help build buildings and pay for rising health costs and help professors make at high and their presidents and their coaches make millions of dollars. So one of the things you do want to show colleges is, look, we can afford to pay this. And oftentimes they'll say, well, what can we do to attract this student? Should we give them $8,000, $10,000, $16,000 to entice that child to come here? Because we know they could be a future donor. Or they're looking at a student who would cost them a lot more money, $30,000 in aid, for example, where we can only have to pay, give up $12,000. It's a big difference. And colleges are always looking to the future. And as soon as your student gets to college, you're going to start getting mail from the alumni department and the foundations within the college to contribute money. You haven't even been able to scrape together the next semester's tuition, and they're asking you for money. But they're looking at those families who can help them out and continue their mission. And one of the things that people don't think about is when they consider their list of colleges, the students list, because a lot of times the parents aren't really involved in that. They let them apply where they want, and they kind of leave it at that. Colleges, if they're targeted, will compete for your student. It could almost be a bidding war. Colleges want the best students. It's good for their rankings. It's good for their U.S. News and World Report rankings. So they can get, if they attract the better students, that's what they want. Because if they're getting a whole bunch of great students and they can reduce their selectivity from, say, 40% to 35%, well, more kids are going to want what they can't have. It's kind of like that. We want to go where we're not wanted. I guess that's put it. and in a way that kind of works. But if you want to get a good deal, it's worth the extra effort to do the forms. I was just looking at the instructions for the CSS profile today, and I know that it takes the average family about 10 hours to complete a form. They say about 2 hours, but I actually work with people, and I know how long it takes them. So, but Harvard did a study, and they found that it takes about 10 hours, and that's about right. And depending on how many schools you're applying to, there could be additional forms, which takes more time. But it's definitely worth the while to do that, so you can get the best deal you can. And even if you make $1 million a year, there are some merit-based scholarships that require the financial aid forms. Even if your child is applying for a local scholarship, they would want to see what's known as a student aid report, the FAFSA. It's the form that's generated after you complete the federal form. And a lot of times the student would have to show that to get their money, at least to qualify for the scholarship. This is a list of glossary terms that you would probably want to get familiar with. There's a few in here. EFC, FAFSA, FSAID, some of them you're familiar with, essays and college admission programs, student loans, CSS profile, unsubsidized, subsidized loans. There's all sorts of things that you want to make sure that you are very familiar with, and one of them is knowing the rules of the road and the terminology, which will enlighten you and allow you to do a much better job. This guy, Bill Gates, his kids can qualify for money if they do the forms. Because a lot of schools would want his kids to come there because they know the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation would lay some real heavy endowment money on them. But if they don't ask, they don't get. You want to take this one, Beth?
Yeah, I just want everybody to understand that the Department of Education basically assigns a minimum out-of-pocket cost for every family that sends a kid to college. And they do that by assigning you what's called an EFC, an expected family contribution. There are several factors that go into it, but it is largely dependent on the income and assets in the name of the parents and the income and assets, if any, in the name of the student. And so when you fill out these forms and send them in, there are formulas that these go through, and they kick out a number called an EFC. And it's really, really critically important. Most of you that work with us know what your EFC is and know that, that's what we really have to pay attention to, because from a cash flow perspective, at a minimum, we have to be prepared to meet that expected family contribution. And it's important to understand that because this is the way the schools look at it. This is how they determine your student's aid eligibility. They take the cost of attendance, which is the whole enchilada. It's everything it costs to go to that school: tuition, room and board, books, living expenses, transportation to and from. They subtract from that the expected family contribution, which is, again, what you are reporting when you file your financial aid forms. And if there's a difference, if the expected family contribution is, in fact, lower than the cost of attendance, whatever that gap is the financial need. And that is the maximum amount of money and of financial aid that the family could receive. Doesn't mean that you will, but that purple area is where the financial aid officer at the college starts their job. So it's really important to understand they are assuming that the family is going to take care of everything that's in the green box, and the school only addresses whatever the gap is. And I think that it's really instructive to walk you through an example of this so that you'll be able to understand this as you think about which schools you're about to apply to right now. So in this example, our family has an expected family contribution of just under $21,000. And that was determined from them reporting all the information as requested on the FAFSA. Now, their student is looking at 4 different schools with 4 different price points. And the question is, given the fact that the range is from $25,000, almost $26,000 a year, to over $57,000 a year, what would their out-of-pocket expense be if their student ended up going to any of those schools? So we want to do a side-by-side comparison. And while some of these numbers are a little bit outdated, we're about a year behind here, actually 2 years behind. Here's what's important to note. We've got College A coming in at $34,000, a little bit more than that. College B, a little over $28,000 a year. College C exceeds $54,000 a year. And College D, a year ago, was costing a family over $62,000 a year to attend. The family's expected family contribution is the same at all of these schools. And so the aid eligibility is very different. The gap between what the school costs and the expected family contribution for the family is very different. The low end at $7,200, the high end it's over $41,000. So how does this work in the real world? Well, here's what happens. First of all, different schools will step up to the plate to meet a different percentage of that gap. Some schools will meet 100% of the gap, other schools not as much. And how they go about filling that need is very different as well. There are really two categories of financial aid, and this is terminology you'll begin to become familiar with. There's what we call gift aid, and when you think about getting a gift, somebody gave it to you, there was no price associated with it, so this is really free money. So College B steps up to the plate to meet less than 60% of the total gap, and they do 3/4 of that with free money and about 1/4 of it with what we call self-help aid, which means that there's interest accruing, that it might be a work study. There is something that you are going to owe as a result of that type of aid, either time, as in a work study, or money in terms of interest on student loans. But you can see that, again, there's a big difference between how much of it is free and how much of it is self-help, depending on the institution. So what that really means is when you take a look at the unmet need, the expected family contribution, the self-help, what's fascinating, and I'm going to bring these schools up so that you can see what this comparison really is looking at, is if I'm a California resident and I send my student to UCLA, my immediate cost that first year is a little over $23,000. If I am a resident of the state of Ohio and I send my student to the Ohio State University, my out-of-pocket cost immediately is about $24,000. Regardless of where I live, if I send my student to Rice University, my out-of-pocket cost is actually just my expected family contribution, or almost $21,000 a year. And the same is true at Duke. And so, as you can see, just from an immediate cost perspective, it can be less expensive to send your student to an expensive private school. Now, will Rice and will Duke University make this kind of offer to every student? No. So understanding, based on GPA, test scores, and admissibility, whether your student is going to show up in the top 20% of the typical freshmen admitted to those kinds of schools, that's very, very important. Because for the right students, they'll absolutely make those kind of offers. And this is how the private schools level the playing field versus, hey, school's expensive, I'll just send my kid in-state to college. And that's why you want to be very strategic about the schools that you want to apply to. This is how a lot of parents feel. You know, you go through this type of an exercise and you learn about all the things that are involved, and it's so tempting to just want to put your head in the sand and say, make it go away. But this is the time of year when you really, really, really want to be on your game. Pay attention, be involved. Stuart, would you take us for a really quick tour through this infographic just so people understand? Here we are on October 1st. We're hurtling toward that May 1st deadline. And this literally is the timeline that we use to help families navigate about, what they're about to embark upon.
Sure. Well, this is really the beginning of the admissions season, and by that I mean there's different admission programs. There's some you probably have heard of, Early Decision, which is a binding program. In other words, your student would sign a contract. If admitted, they have to go. I mean, there is an out if you can't afford it. The financial aid isn't good enough. Then you can, decline. But that's one of the programs that starts off now, and the applications generally are due about November 1st. So getting the common application started, or the universal application, whichever they are, that really begins now, if not even sooner, actually. That's where the essays and the recommendations are all going to be attached to those applications. As far as the financial aid side goes, when you do apply Early Decision, you have to get your ducks in a row much sooner, November 1st typically, or November 15th. Some of the forms are going to be required. There's also another program called Early Action, and it follows the same pattern in terms of deadlines. However, if the student's admitted, they're not obligated to attend. It just gives them an opportunity to stay out of the regular applicant pool. And some schools, that's significant, and other schools, well, because they're letting you know sooner, it's a little harder. It's hard to know exactly what's going on until December 15th. Did you get in? Did your student get in or not? But either way, these schools typically have a form called the CSS profile form, which takes at least 2 hours to do, but doing it correctly is a whole other thing. And so you want to get that started right now, your tax forms from last year. If you're divorced or separated, or you know, the student has a parent, you know, you weren't married when you had this your child, and either you're living together or apart, that parent will be expected to contribute financially to the cause, and there'll be forms there as well. One of them is called the non-custodial profile, and tax returns may be asked for as well. So that's what happens between October, November, and into December. And as I said, the early action is not binding. So if there's other schools the students can, you know, wants to apply to, they certainly can, and as long as they meet the deadlines. Now there's a trend going on right now where you have college admission deadlines coming at their normal times, but now they're saying if you want to get a priority for a scholarship, full consideration for a merit scholarship, you need to get your application in a couple of months early. So this can cause some additional stress on students, and especially when they're not aware of this. So all the schools your child applies to need to be contacted to see if they have a policy like that. So that if you're looking at a January 1st or January 15th a deadline, you need to find out, well, is December 1st or January 1st the deadline for full merit consideration? So that's something you're going to want to do. After January 1st, the free application for federal student aid is available, and that is the federal form, which will give you a federal expected family contribution. And by the way, I just wanted to mention a couple slides back, we were looking at some numbers, EFC, and I just had a phone call from my sister-in-law actually last night, and she was asking me about money she had put in her student's name. Well, it was going to cost her about $7,000 a year the way it was. So I gave her some advice that hopefully she'll take and increase her eligibility by about $7,000. So how you come up with that EFC, you have some control of that, and I urge you to find out everything you can to get that number lowered. One thing that happens more and more frequently is that you will not get a financial aid letter directly from the college anymore. It won't come in the mailbox. They still send letters of admission and rejection through the mail, but financial aid awards are now being posted on a portal. So every application your student sends in will be answered with a receipt. You'll get something in the mail or an email that says, this is your student's username and ID for our school. And you need to take over that process because they're getting lots and lots of emails, and they're very busy with their activities. Their applications are in now, and they're trying to, study, get ready for, finals and all that. So it's a really good idea if you take that over, and if you have to make a spreadsheet, something that you can put down each college's username and password and check the admission requirements if they've been satisfied, and what other financial aid requirements have been satisfied and what you still need. Oftentimes you'll be selected for verification, which is not a form that you would automatically get. You have to find that out, and some schools will tell you, others you're expected to find that out and get that form and complete it and send it. It's a bit like an audit, and there's some additional tax returns that may need to be sent into the school. There's additional forms throughout the process. You'll see in yellow, or gold I should say, in the middle, it says supplemental forms for the CSS profile, IDOC deadlines. Around March 2nd, you will get this, this notice from the College Board, or IDOC specifically, saying that they're ready for you to submit your taxes on March 2nd. So what we do is we let you know in early January, or sooner if we have all the schools. We let you know what schools are going to be requiring that, and let you know ahead of time. You should be definitely talking to your tax person at this time, if not sooner, that you're applying for aid and you want to get your taxes expedited, so that you don't have to wait for financial aid awards or miss out entirely. Once that FAFSA is done, going back to that, you get what's known as the student aid report. And I mentioned that earlier regarding the scholarships, the local scholarships that your student may apply for, and they're encouraged to and have a much better chance of getting. But oftentimes they're going to want to see the SAR, and that's another reason to make sure that you fill out the FAFSA. Also, if you want to qualify for your student to have some skin in the game, you're going to want them to take some of these subsidized loans or unsubsidized, and you can subsidize them. And there was a loan program that's been around for a long time known as the Perkins loan that was finally just discontinued last night. Congress dumped it, and it's really too bad because it was a good program, great rates, and great forgiveness options, so that they could be forgiven down the road. So one less thing, I don't know what they're going to do to fill that. Probably just put more on the family. So that's even more reason to find out what you can do to get more scholarship and grant money, going in. Front load your possible packages with those. We host a couple of teleconferences and webinars regarding these award letters that will be coming online, and you're going to want to evaluate them, and we'll teach you about what they are, all the components, what they mean, and how you can compare them with different schools. Sometimes schools can cost more than another school, but yet offer a much bigger tuition discount, which simply means that the school wants the student more than the other school, even though they may cost more. So there may be some real advantages to that. The school might have a very good 4-year graduation rate, or 5-year graduation rate. They may have more opportunities for student research and paid assistantships and things like that. Study abroad programs that are good. Some are not so good. Not all schools are created equal in many, many ways. So you're going to want to know about all those options that the schools offer, and your student can really get the most out of their education. I mean, no matter if you're spending $25,000, $30,000, $50,000, $60,000. Now, and New York University is just over $70,000. I think Sarah Lawrence College is also over 70 now. But they're moving from the 60s up there. And as you get more towards the end and you're determining which school to go to, you evaluate your awards and you see what's the best deal, and maybe there's some bad deals there and you need to appeal to get more money, because you've made a promise to your students, to your child, that you would figure, if they did the work, you'd figure out a way to make it happen, and it's a promise you'd like to keep to yourself. Well, oftentimes I hear parents, they've made that promise and they're barely able to make it for child number 1, but then what about child 2 and 3? They don't have any more money to do it, and they didn't don't do the planning now. I can't stress enough. It will make your life so much better, give you the options that you won't have when you get to the end of the mad dash without taking care of a lot of these things. So there's other things that go on down the road, applications for the loans, and all the great stuff with getting a roommate and all that that comes in May and after. But primarily, this is the path you take that hopefully will pay off from now until December 1st or May 1st.
Thank you, Stuart. I think it's just really important for parents to understand that this is a progression. that while it can seem overwhelming, if you bite off a little bit of this at a time and you understand what you're about to face, it's a lot more manageable. You just have to stay on top of it. I encourage families to pick, one time a week when they're going to sit down and deal with this. It may be only 20 or 30 minutes, but to kind of move the peanut forward, as I like to say, and not let this pile up and kind of get to the point where you feel buried and you get lost. Sort of taking this on month by month, step by step, does make it very manageable.
Can I say, I got to throw this in, maybe you've heard me say this, inch by inch, life's a cinch. Yard by yard, it's very hard. So try not to look at the whole thing all at once. Like Beth.
Nicely done. I like it.
Move that peanut. I like that too.
So well, that's the formal part of our presentation. A couple of things. Number one, if you have questions, you need a little guidance, don't hesitate to send us an email at info@collegefundingcoaches.com. Give us a call, 719-522-2278, to answer your questions. But I would like to, while we're still on this, open this up. There's a chat box feature that if you would like, I have everybody muted just because it's a lot easier for everybody to hear the information without all the distractions of background noise. But if you have any specific questions, just type them in the chat box, and we'll take advantage of having Stuart. A couple of them are coming in. Number one, what is different about the CSS profile versus the FAFSA? Stuart, you want to kind of help people understand that?
Sure. It's a good question. The CSS profile stands for the College Scholarship Service Financial Aid Profile, and it is a financial aid colonoscopy, if you will. When you print one of these things out after you've answered, it's like 28 pages long, and they ask if you have a business, if you're divorced, if you have a farm, other kids in college, going to private school. There's all sorts of information they want to know, and it is a big form. The schools that have the most money tend to use that form because it's their money, not the federal government. So they even use a different formula. They evaluate your home. They may ask you about your cars, where you go to church, money in foreign country. I mean, there are 1,000 questions that you could be asked, and they need to be consistent with the information you provide them. And it does cost. There is a $9 registration fee and $16 for the first school. I found out today that is continuing for this year as well. So it's $25 for the first, and I saw a kid the other day. It's like 15 schools, all profile schools.
Oh man.
And so poor mom and dad. But that's primarily the difference. It's used for institutional. The FAFSA is used for federal money, which most people don't qualify for, but a lot of schools do use it to give some of their money away.
Next question, Stuart. What if my ex doesn't want to pay?
Well, it depends on the school, and that's a sad thing when that happens, although sometimes exes aren't in a position to pay. Sometimes they just want to take it out on their wives or husbands through the kids. We see an awful lot of the time. But what do you do? Well, some schools will provide you a special form that you'll want to get third-party verification from a therapist, an attorney, somebody that knows the family situation and can attest that the ex is not the non-custodial parent is refusing to pay or can't pay. Sometimes you have parents who are, they're bankrupt, they're in prison, all sorts of things. But generally, the schools expect both parents to participate, and if you don't get that person to fill out the form, then you're going to have to be stuck with this really uncomfortable things of trying to find people that will write things down for you, letters to send to the school saying why that situation exists. And they also want to know, how often does that child see that parent? You know, if they even see them a few times a year, well, that's generally not going to be enough to let you off the hook. So you could be in a real quandary, and hopefully that the person who, you know, the non-custodial parent can be talked to about this and see what they can do. At least fill out the form. They're not assessed as heavily as the custodial parent. So I just would encourage you to find a way to have them do it for the sake of the child. It's not necessarily mean they have to pay, but to get the financial aid offer, they have to fill out the form.
Next question. There's rumor of pending layoffs at my place of work. What if we file the forms in January and then I lose my job in February?
Yeah, that's a good question too, because it does happen, whether it's then or. So what you'd want to do at that point is wait till you get the offers, you know, because you really don't know what you can do until the offers come in, and then you see what the difference in your EFC would be with that loss. Now, sometimes you get a severance package, and the school would simply say, well, when that runs out, then talk to us. So it depends on, you know, what's going to happen financially. Generally, you're going to have to tell them what happened, what does it mean, what are you trying to do to cope, and what do you want. But oftentimes, you know, colleges aren't cold-hearted, you know, institutions. I mean, they have a mission to provide assistance when they can. They want to distribute it evenly and fairly, as at least that's what they say. So I would, you know, talk to the schools after you get the awards and make an appeal based on that.
Excellent. Well, that wraps up all of our questions that have come in. But again, if you're driving down the road tomorrow and something pops into your mind and you think, oh, I wish I would have asked that, don't hesitate to shoot us an email at info@collegefundingcoaches.com or give us a call, because we're here to be of assistance and see if we can help you. So with that said, I'm going to call it a wrap. Thank you, Stuart. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us tonight, and hopefully you parents feel a little bit more confident about what you're about to do. So with that, thanks for joining us, and we'll talk soon.